Karen's smug grin was a slap across the face of every honest farmer in Willow Creek. She'd strutted onto my land like she owned the sun itself, barking orders and waving her HOA clipboard as if it were a royal scepter. My name's Ethan Caldwell, and for 30 years, I'd tilled this soil, raised my crops, and kept my animals fed on this 10-acre plot my granddaddy left me. It wasn't much, but it was mine until Karen and her homeowners association decided my humble farm was an eyesore to their shiny new subdivision. It started small, like a weed you don't notice until it's choked your garden. The HOA sent letters, polite at first, complaining about my chickens clucking too loud or my old barns peeling paint. I ignored them. I wasn't part of their gated community, and my land predated their cookie-cutter mansions by decades. But Karen, the HOA president, didn't take kindly to being ignored. She was a woman who thrived on control, her hair always pinned in a tight bun, her smile sharp enough to cut glass. She'd moved to Willow Creek from the city, bringing with her a rulebook thicker than my almanac and an ego to match. One morning, I woke to find a chain-link fence slicing through my cornfield. It wasn't just any fence, it was a monstrosity, 8 feet tall, barbed wire curling along the top like a snake ready to strike. My crops, rows of golden stalks I'd nursed through a brutal summer, were crushed beneath its posts. My chickens were trapped on the other side, flapping in panic, and my old collie, Rusty, whimpered as he paced along the barrier, unable to reach his favorite shade tree. A note stapled to a post read, HOA property line correction. Comply or face fines. Karen's signature was scrawled at the bottom, her looping cursive mocking me. I stormed to her McMansion, fists clenched, ready to give her a piece of my mind. She stood on her porch, sipping iced tea like she hadn't just gutted my livelihood. "Ethan, your farm's an embarrassment," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "This fence is for everyone's benefit. You'll thank me when property values rise." I pointed out that my land wasn't under HOA jurisdiction, but she just waved her hand, dismissing me like a fly. "Check the county records, dear. Your property line's been redrawn. Legally." Legally? I spent that night poring over deeds and maps, my kitchen table buried under yellowed papers. My granddaddy's plot was clear, 10 acres, untouched by any HOA claim. But Karen had pull with the county clerk, a weaselly man named Harold who owed her favors. They'd manipulated a survey, shifting my boundary to give the HOA a chunk of my land that held my crops, my animals' grazing area, and the only access road to my barn. Worse, the fence locked me out of my own gate, the one path wide enough for my tractor. Karen's crew had installed a padlock, and she held the only key. The next week was a blur of rage and desperation. I tried reasoning with her, but she'd just smirk and quote bylaws I'd never agreed to. Neighbors, folks I'd known since childhood, started avoiding my eyes at the feed store. Karen had spun a tale that I was the problem, a stubborn old farmer standing in the way of progress. My corn wilted, my chickens stopped laying, and Rusty grew listless, confused by the fence that split our world in two. I hired a lawyer, but he warned me the county's red tape could take years to untangle. Years I didn't have. My savings were thin, and without crops, I'd lose everything. Then I heard whispers at the diner. Karen's HOA was in debt, overextended from building their fancy clubhouse and pool. They were desperate for cash, and my land prime for development was their golden ticket. That's when I saw it. The county was auctioning off a small parcel, the strip of land holding the access gate to my property. The HOA owned it, but they'd defaulted on taxes. Karen didn't know. Nobody did. It was a clerical oversight, buried in fine print. I had one chance. I cashed out my emergency fund, every penny I'd saved for a new tractor, and went to the auction. Karen was there, schmoozing with developers, oblivious to the lot number I was eyeing. When the auctioneer called it, I raised my paddle. Her head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing, but it was too late. I won the bid $4,400 steel, and the only key to that gate was now mine. I held it up as I left, letting it glint in the sun. Karen's face turned purple, but I just tipped my hat and walked away. She didn't waste time. The next day, she was at my door, demanding the key. "You're holding the community hostage, Ethan," she shrieked, her composure cracking like thin ice. I leaned against my porch railing, twirling the key on my finger. "Funny," I said, "I thought you were the one fencing folks out." She threatened lawsuits, fines, even calling the sheriff, but I knew my rights. That gate was my property now, and without it, her precious subdivision was landlocked. No access for their fancy cars, no deliveries, no nothing. The tables had turned. But Karen wasn't one to back down. She rallied her HOA cronies, and they came at me with everything: petitions, protests, even a smear campaign on the local news calling me a greedy recluse. My neighbors, caught in the crossfire, started to crack. Old Mrs. Jenkins, who'd bake me pies every Christmas, begged me to compromise. "Just give her the key, Ethan. It's not worth the fight." But it wasn't about the key anymore. It was about my home, my legacy, and the principle of standing up to a bully who thought she could steamroll anyone in her path. Karen's campaign against me grew uglier by the day. She plastered signs around Willow Creek, each one a jab at my character: Ethan Caldwell, the farmer who fences out progress. She'd hired a PR lackey to spin her narrative, painting herself as the victim of my selfish refusal to hand over the gate key. The local paper ran a story with her tearful quote about how my actions were stranding families in the subdivision. Never mind that she'd stranded my livestock and livelihood first. Her hypocrisy burned like a brush fire, but I held tight to that key, its weight in my pocket a reminder of the ground I'd gained. I wasn't alone in this fight, though it often felt that way. My closest ally was Clara, the diner owner who'd known my family since I was a boy. She was a wiry woman with a smoker's rasp and a heart bigger than her greasy spoon. Clara saw through Karen's facade from the start. "That woman's got a soul meaner than a starved coyote," she'd mutter, pouring me coffee strong enough to wake the dead. She let me use her diner as a war room, where I'd meet with the few neighbors who hadn't been swayed by Karen's charm offensive. There was Tom, a retired mechanic with a limp and a grudge against the HOA's fees, and Maria, a single mom who'd moved to Willow Creek for a quiet life, only to find Karen's rules suffocating her. Together, we pieced together a plan not just to hold my ground, but to expose Karen for what she was. The tension in town was palpable, like the air before a summer storm. Karen escalated her tactics, sending HOA enforcers to my property line daily. They'd take photos, jot notes, and shout demands through megaphones, claiming I was violating some obscure bylaw. One morning, I found my mailbox smashed, my name spray-painted across it in red, "Greedy." I knew it was Karen's doing. Her minions were too spineless to act without her orders. Rusty, my collie, growled at the sight, his fur bristling as he sensed the threat closing in. I replaced the mailbox, but the message was clear: Karen was willing to play dirty. Her boldest move came at the town hall meeting. The room was packed, the air thick with sweat and whispers. Karen took the podium, her voice honeyed but venomous, announcing a community initiative to seize my gate property through eminent domain. She claimed it was for the public good, waving a petition with signatures from her HOA loyalists. My stomach churned as she spoke, her eyes locking onto mine from across the room. She was betting I'd crack under the pressure, that I'd hand over the key to avoid a legal battle I couldn't afford. But she didn't know me. Caldwells don't bend to bullies. I stood up, my boots heavy on the creaky floorboards, and called her bluff. "Karen, you talk about community, but you fenced off my crops, my animals, my life. You redrew my property line with a crooked surveyor and thought I wouldn't notice." The room went silent, faces turning to her. I held up the gate key, letting it catch the fluorescent light. "This key's mine, bought fair and square. You want it? Take me to court. But I'll fight you to my last breath." A few folks clapped. Clara loudest of all, but Karen's smile didn't waver. She was too deep in her own delusion to back down. That night, I couldn't sleep. The weight of the fight pressed on me, heavy as a hay bale. I sat on my porch, Rusty at my feet, staring at the fence that scarred my land. The stars were out, bright and unyielding, reminding me of the nights I'd spent with my granddaddy, learning the land's rhythms. He'd taught me to stand firm, but he'd also warned that pride could blind a man. Was I fighting for my home or just my stubbornness? The doubt gnawed at me, but then I thought of Karen's smug face, her willingness to trample anyone for her own gain. No, this wasn't just about me. It was about every small farmer, every underdog who'd ever been pushed around by someone with too much power and too little heart. The next morning, Clara called with news. She'd overheard Karen at the diner, bragging to Harold about a developer's offer. They planned to buy up my land once they forced me out, turning it into condos for city folks chasing rural charm. But there was a catch: the developer needed access through my gate, and without it, the deal was dead. That's why Karen was so desperate for the key. It wasn't just about control, it was about cash. Clara had dug deeper, talking to a friend at the county office, and found that Karen had bribed Harold to fudge the survey. It was a shaky thread, but it was something. I took that thread and ran with it. Tom knew a guy at the state land office, a no-nonsense auditor named Diane who hated corruption as much as I hated that fence. I sent her everything: me granddaddy's deed, the auction receipt, the HOA's shady survey. Diane was skeptical but promised to look into it. Meanwhile, Karen doubled down. She hired a lawyer, a slick city type who sent me cease and desist letters daily. She even got the sheriff to visit, claiming I was harassing her by refusing access. The sheriff, an old high school buddy, just shook his head and told me to watch my back. Karen's got friends in high places, Ethan. Don't underestimate her. But Karen underestimated me. I wasn't just a farmer, I was a man with nothing left to lose. I started rallying the town, talking to anyone who'd listen. At Clara's diner, I handed out flyers with the truth: how Karen's HOA had overstepped, how her fence had killed my crops, how her greed was choking Willow Creek. Maria spread the word to the subdivision moms, who were starting to see Karen's rules for what they were: a power grab. Tom fixed up an old projector, and we screened a grainy video I'd taken of the fence's damaged wilted corn, scattered chickens, Rusty's sad eyes. People started talking, and Karen's grip on the narrative slipped. The turning point came when Diane called. She'd audited the county records and found proof of Harold's tampering. The original survey was clean, me land was mine, every inch of it. Better yet, Karen's bribe was documented in emails Harold hadn't bothered to delete. Diane was filing charges, and the county was voiding the HOA's claim. I could have wept, but there was no time. Karen got wind of the audit and went into overdrive. She showed up at my farm with a bulldozer, claiming she'd reclaim her land by force. I stood in front of that machine, key in hand, Rusty barking at my side. "You'll have to run me over first," I said, my voice steady despite the fear in my gut. Karen hesitated, her face a mask of rage and calculation. The bulldozer idled, its engine growling like a beast. Neighbors gathered, phones out, recording everything. Clara was there, yelling for Karen to back off. Maria stood beside me, her kids clinging to her, their eyes wide. For a moment, it felt like the whole town held its breath. Then Karen climbed down, her heels sinking into the dirt, and pointed at me. "This isn't over, Ethan. You'll regret this." But it was over. Or close to it. Karen's threat hung in the air like smoke, but the tide was turning. The bulldozer retreated, its engine sputtering as it backed away from my land. The crowd of neighbors, now a small army of witnesses, murmured in solidarity. Clara's voice cut through, sharp and triumphant. "You're done, Karen. Pack it up." For the first time, I saw a flicker of doubt in Karen's eyes, her carefully curated mask slipping. She stormed off, her heels kicking up dust, but I knew she wasn't finished. Not yet. A woman like her didn't go down without a final, desperate swing. The next day, Diane's audit hit the county like a thunderclap. The local paper, once Karen's mouthpiece, ran a front-page exposé, HOA president caught in land grab scandal. Harold, the county clerk, was suspended, his emails laid bare for all to see. They detailed Karen's bribe $5,000 in cash for a forged survey that stole half my acreage. The evidence was ironclad, and the state was building a case for fraud. My land was restored, the fence declared illegal, and the HOA's claim nullified. I could have torn that chain-link monstrosity down right then, but I waited. I wanted Karen to see it fall on my terms. She didn't take the news lying down. Karen rallied her remaining loyalists, a dwindling group of HOA diehards who clung to her promises of progress. They picketed the county office, waving signs about property rights and community values. It was pathetic, like watching a sinking ship's crew bail water with teacups. The developer she'd courted pulled out, unwilling to touch a deal tainted by scandal. Without my gate, their condo dreams were dead, and Karen's empire was crumbling. Still, she doubled down, filing a lawsuit against me for obstructing community access. Her lawyer's letter was a masterpiece of bluster, but it lacked teeth. Diane's audit had stripped her of credibility, and the sheriff, my old friend, laughed it off. She's grasping at straws, Ethan. Let her swing. I wasn't content to just wait her out. With Clara's help, I organized a town meeting at the diner, inviting everyone, HOA members, farmers, even the kids who'd watched the drama unfold. I stood on a makeshift stage of milk crates, the gate key dangling from my neck like a medal. This isn't just about my land, I said, my voice rough but steady. It's about what happens when someone thinks they can bully their way to power. Karen didn't just fence off my crops and my dog, she fenced off our freedom. Maria translated for the Spanish-speaking families, her voice carrying the same fire. Tom passed out photos of my ruined cornfield, the chickens trapped, Rusty's forlorn face. The room buzzed with anger, not just for me, but for every time Karen's rules had squeezed the life out of Willow Creek. The meeting sparked something. Neighbors who'd stayed silent started speaking up. Mrs. Jenkins, who'd once begged me to compromise, admitted Karen had fined her for planting roses, too red for the HOA's aesthetic. Maria shared how Karen's fees had forced her to skip meals to pay rent. Even some HOA members, tired of Karen's tyranny, defected. We formed a coalition, not just to fight the lawsuit but to dissolve the HOA entirely. It was a long shot. HOAs were legal fortresses, but we had momentum, and Karen was bleeding allies. The showdown came at the courthouse. Karen's lawsuit was her last stand, a desperate bid to save face. She strode in, chin high, her lawyer at her side like a loyal dog. I represented myself, armed with Diane's audit, my granddaddy's deed, and the auction receipt for the gate property. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Clara, ironic, given my ally's name, listened as Karen's lawyer spun a tale of me holding the community hostage. When it was my turn, I kept it simple. I laid out the facts: Karen's bribe, the illegal fence, the crops she'd destroyed, the animals she'd trapped. I held up the key, now a symbol of her overreach. This key's mine, Your Honor, bought legal. She wants it. She should have thought twice before stealing my land. The courtroom was silent as the judge reviewed the evidence. Karen's face was a storm cloud, her fingers drumming nervously. When the gavel fell, it was like a lightning strike. The lawsuit was dismissed, the HOA's claim on my land voided, and Karen was ordered to pay restitution for my losses, $20,000 for the crops and emotional distress. The judge didn't stop there. She recommended a criminal investigation into Karen's bribery, citing Diane's findings. As the bailiff escorted Karen out, her eyes met mine, not with defiance but with something worse, defeat. The fence came down the next day. I didn't hire a crew, I wanted the satisfaction. Clara, Tom, Maria, and half the town showed up with sledgehammers and wire cutters. We tore that chain link apart, post by post, the metal screeching as it fell. Rusty ran free, chasing chickens that clucked with joy. My corn was gone, but I'd replant. The land was mine again, whole and unbroken. We burned the HOA's property line correction sign in a bonfire, the flames licking the sky as we cheered. Clara handed me a beer, her grin wide. To justice, she said. I clinked her bottle, but my eyes were on the horizon, where my field stretched free. Karen didn't leave town right away. She holed up in her McMansion, blinds drawn, as the HOA dissolved under a vote led by Maria. The criminal charges stuck bribery and fraud, with Harold turning state's evidence to save his skin. Karen pleaded guilty to avoid jail, but the fines and legal fees gutted her savings. The developer deal collapsed, and her house, once the crown jewel of the subdivision, went into foreclosure. Last I heard, she'd moved to a cramped apartment in the city, her dreams of ruling Willow Creek as dust. I rebuilt, slowly. The restitution money bought seeds and a new coop for the chickens. Rusty's tail wagged again, and the town felt lighter, like it could breathe. At the diner, Clara hung a photo of the gate key above the counter, a reminder of what we'd won. Neighbors stopped by with pies, tools, even offers to help till my fields. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was ours again. As I locked the gate one evening, the key cold in my hand, I thought about Karen. Not with anger, but with a kind of pity. She'd fenced off more than my land she'd fenced off her own heart, chasing power she could never hold. I turned to Rusty, scratching his ears. We're home, boy, I said. The stars were out, same as always, and the land hummed beneath my feet, alive and free.